We are live. Naira and get 4,000 naira. And then if you load 500 naira, you get 10,000 naira. Isn't that incredible? Well, don't waste time now. Get back on MTN right now and know what it truly feels like to be welcomed back. Remember, terms and conditions apply.
MTN, everywhere you go. The Smooth Breakfast presents the headlines, the stories, the news. Headlines. In-depth analysis of national current affairs.
All right, studio, mics are up.
On Smooth.
Good morning and welcome. You are listening to Smooth Breakfast on Smooth 98.1. It's time to jump into detailed newspaper analysis inside of Freshly Pressed, as it is 7:30 on the dot today, 14th of May 2018. Joining Valentine and myself in the studio this morning to join in our newspaper analysis, we have Tunde Okufi, who is up on Twitter as @BigCuffs. Good morning, Tunde.
Morning, Folu.
Great to have you here. And we've got Ayo Esho, who's here in the studio and of course on Twitter as Esho1. There you go. Good morning, Ayo. How are you? Fantastic stuff. And Lagos, we've got you and the rest of the world up on our YouTube channel. So if you go right now to youtube.com/smooth981FM Lagos, you'll see our faces there waving at you and saying hello and good morning. We're jumping into the first story of the morning. We will talk about a SERAP issue, a legal accountability issue from the Punch newspaper. SERAP drags Buhari to the United Nations for disobeying court judgments. As we go into the story, remember you can tweet at us. Just use the hashtag FreshlyPress981 up on Twitter, or send us messages to our WhatsApp number, which we've already put online for you. Tunde, looking at SERAP, who are the Socio-Economic Rights and Accountability Project, they've written a letter to the United Nations asking them to prevail on the president to stop the willful disobedience of court judgments. Now, SERAP's Deputy Director, Mr. Timothy Adewale, who we have had in our studios discussing issues of this nature, points out several ways or in the letter in which the federal government has handpicked what to do and which judgments to obey and which not to obey. The most prominent of which we're looking at the continued incarceration of the leader of the Shiite movement, Ibrahim El-Zakzaki. This is since they've been in detention since December of 2015, although it is claimed it is for their protection. And most recently, the federal government did another charge against them. They're still being held. We're looking at Dasuki as well. A number of these issues. What's your take on this story?
I mean, it's just that excuse about El-Zakzaki is just, it's amazing. So is it witness protection or you keep someone in detention and restrict their movement, and you say it's for their safety? It's classic deflection and misinformation, to be honest. This move by SERAP is commendable. It's the right thing. SERAP are one of the few voices out there that are taking the government to task on issues where they have fallen short or just flagrantly disobeyed the law, and someone needs to do that. There is very often, back to the Zakzaki case, it's not even so apparent that his wife is also in detention as well since that time.
People have forgotten she's fallen out of the stories.
Fallen out of the stories. It's appalling. You can't say you stand for the rule of law and you pick and choose what part of the law you want to obey. If you say you stand against corruption and people shouldn't loot our commonwealth, that you're asking them to obey the rule of law, right? Obeying court orders is part of the rule of law. Everything comes together. Just as the story points out, just as one of the gentlemen who's commented on this pointed out, that even if the judgment was delivered by a drunk judge, even if you had to say the judge didn't know what he was doing, you have to, in the first part, obey that order. And if you have anything further, then you can, reinstitute, charges or your case against the individual. Now, the thing, and people may look at it and say, okay, so how effective is, taking this? Is Buhari? Look at the headline. Drags Buhari to the UN. Is Buhari going to appear before the UN over this? The chances are, 0 to none. To be honest, it's very unlikely. that this that he would appear before the UN on this matter at all. But what it does do, though, is that it starts to put pressure on an international scale. So when he makes those foreign visits and those foreign trips,
Thank you.
they will raise that issue with him and say, oh, okay, we know you want to buy tomahawks and all those beautiful things. You want FDI, but how about this little issue here? You have human rights
issues that have been filed, official complaints
against your company, so against your country, and that is where the pressure, that's where moves like this start to bear fruit and take effect.
Thank you very much for that, Tunde. That is the pressure button, and that is the button that we must press if we are to ensure that our government continues to obey the rule of law. Speaking of the rule, see how our government's been doing in other areas, fiddling with our oil. Oil is what we're talking about next. Ayo, the story we're referring to is from ThisDay newspaper, how top oil industry officials have ruined Nigeria's refineries. Now, it is no news to us as a people, or no surprise to us as a people, that our oil industry and our refineries have been mismanaged. When we've seen over the years the amount of money that has been allegedly pumped into turnaround maintenance, TAM, which we like to affectionately call it. TAM almost feels like a friend at this point, but that never actually visits, because we have not seen the dividends of the billions spent in this region. But please do take us through the story and your analysis of it.
So this is a story that I think every Nigerian should go through. It's on ThisDay, and it's actually very sad. Most of the information here we had some form of hunch on what was happening in the industry. But this is actually very sad, because now it's coming from an authority, Bekachuku himself. And I'm just going to jump, leaving all the figures that I stated. I just want to read a part that says, after the turnaround maintenance that never happened, okay, the next announcement would be attack by vandals. They will claim that the refineries have stopped producing as a result of the attack. The next thing is to award another contract for TAM, turnaround maintenance, and billions of dollars will be released for upgrades, and the turnaround maintenance never happened. So I know we've always had this feeling that there was something fishy going on in the industry. I mean, Nigeria has 4 refineries at the moment, and the capacity is 5,000 barrels per day. We produce around 2.7 as of now. That was as at 2016 report. And was one of the major ways in which we could, I mean, we're talking about job employment on the low in Nigeria, and one of the best places in which we could actually employ a whole lot of young Nigerians is through the downstream sector. The upstream, yes, does employ, but you have so much that can be done from the downstream. And if you think about how some people are actually jeopardizing the future of the country, and what happens is that we take our barrels of oil, our crude oil, we take it out of the country, and then we actually make those European countries have a better means of employing their own youth, and we leave ours, and just to the peril of our Nigerians, and some actually making money. It's actually very sad. Now,
something that concerns me, as you've spoken about these issues, is that a lot of the activity that is spoken about in this story, and it does go into a fair amount of detail, is just outright criminal activity.
It is
so
criminal.
What happens to those who are found culpable? Their names that are mentioned. We are in the process of trying to make the NNPC more transparent, but who's ever going to hold them accountable?
I don't know how long it's going to take. I mean, Desiane has been in the papers for a while now, saying she's going to be probed and all that, and I know she's in the UK and all, and she's having her own issues also over there. But I'm wondering why EFCC is taking such a long time to actually start some form of prosecution on that. They keep mentioning names. They keep saying there was an inflation of contract here, and I really don't get it, because if you think about the process of procurement, it's actually it's meant to be stiff. And I'm not surprised that Ibekachuku said they're going to be bringing back the OEMs that actually made
that's the original
equipment manufacturers of the refineries.
Yes.
Normally, when you have
the original refinery builders.
Yes, when
they're still in operation.
Well, at least Saipem is.
They're not Nigerian companies, so they probably will be.
Not.
It's just so old. It's a dig on it being so old.
No, they will always have their records and design plans to still be there. But normally, when you're procuring something of that magnitude, part of what the contracts would entail is the turnaround maintenance, and it's always meant to be like periodic. You don't bring in a fresh person usually most of the time to go maintain those equipment because the designs are by somebody.
Except it's been briefed.
Exactly. So that's normally how it should be, But it's now I mean, it says that now they're planning $1.2 billion to repair again. Where I'm hoping that this administration at least will be sincere, and this same story would not happen again. And also, I also hope that those that actually perpetrated this criminal activities are brought to book.
2019.
That's another mistake.
2019. 2019.
I can
let's
only
focus.
hope.
Speaking of hopeful things, we've been hoping that interest rates would lower, but 18 banks have resisted the push to lower interest rates, according to the Vanguard newspaper. Now, this is almost a year after the Central Bank of Nigeria began a drive towards lower interest rates. 18 banks have declined to toe the bank's apex policy line. Now, what we're looking at is a move that was sort of targeted at forcing banks to pull back their stockpile of funds in particular instruments such as the Nigerian Treasury bills, which they hoped would sort of indicate or drive private sector lending to have lower rates. But when we look at the details of the story, there are several banks that have not moved theirs at all downwards. There's one at least that went upwards. And the explanation given is, there are a number of risk factors, including, the risk of the borrowers, the risk profile of the borrowers themselves. Tunde, over to you.
Right, on this one, just very quickly, I'm with the banks here.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why. The story does a good job of shifting the focus away from the central bank from the CBN onto the banks.
As though look,
with statements like
you haven't lowered.
With statements like the central bank's policy to deliberately lower borrowing rates at which banks borrow onto customers, customers. But the truth is, the central bank hasn't done anything.
Okay, why do you say that?
About this, what they point to here is reducing the rate, the treasury bill rate.
Yes.
The reason why treasury bills have gone down, or the reason why they go up, has to do with government borrowing. When the government needs more money, just like when we're running around, when we had a hole in the budget, the government had to borrow a lot more domestically as well and borrow from us through treasury bills. The rate then therefore goes up. The government doesn't need to do so much borrowing anymore. So treasury bill rate goes down. That's just the way it works.
Okay.
It really doesn't have any huge or big impact on the rate at which the banks lend onto customers. There are a bunch of other factors. It's market driven, right? If the central bank is serious about this, why don't they reduce MPR?
I was going to say, because it does talk about the MPR. Talk to us about the impact of that, and why do you think central bank hasn't?
They should crash it. There's so many factors. It's not just the rate of T-bills. They should use MPR at the rate at which they borrow out. They should reduce. They should think about factors, risk factors, really and truly. Identification, proper identification is just beginning to take up here. Those are things that are important for retail lending. There are a bunch of factors, right? There's the cash adequacy ratio. There's so many things that go into this. So for the central bank to just say, oh, we've had policies trying to push down interest rates and all that it can, lending rates and all that it can point to is T-bills is a bit of...
okay, I've always had this question.
Okay.
I mean, especially, I remember when I was still new in banking, I asked my head of operations. Now, I understand that the NPR is 14% and all that, but this is what I always, the discrepancy between the lending and
just to clarify for people who may be unaware, NPR monetary policy rate.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Now, here's the problem I have. In developed countries, I understand those countries are developed. You have the lending rate as low as 5% and the likes. Here in Nigeria, it's as high as 27, depending on what you're actually doing. And I know that the NPR is not low. It's not been reduced. I agree with you, but I still think about the difference between how much you actually, like for instance, as of today, the savings.
Okay, let me help. The banks have a part to play. They're also culpable.
So the two.
My point is that they shouldn't just push it at them and say we're doing things to move this in the right direction and you're not.
So exactly what you're saying is where I was going to. The truth is that the CBN and the bankers are actually in this together. Okay.
Buddy banking system.
So the truth is that they could actually, if they want to actually drive it down, they could drive it down. The truth is, according to what he told me, that we need to make more money. That was what he said, and that's actually what is happening. They are making a whole lot of money.
MI has this one from WhatsApp. It says SERAP is really doing its bit to hold the government accountable. We must really rally around them when they take actions like this. The flagrant disregard for court judgments is appalling and a threat to our fledgling democracy. The law is supreme. Also, this other one here from Benga says, we're tired of hearing turnaround maintenance all the time and nothing comes out of it.
I tell you, we really are tired. But speaking of nothing coming out of investigations, Tunde, a very interesting development. Last week we heard about a Nigerian diplomat that was killed in Sudan. This week the headline from the Punch newspaper reads, Sudan arrests the suspected killer of a Nigerian diplomat. But it is a story that seems strangely devoid of any real details. They say they've arrested a woman who they described as a foreign woman, the offender, a foreign woman who committed the crime, is how she's been described. Allegedly, this woman confessed to the murder of the diplomat and his stolen possessions. We have no details as to the circumstances, no details to the nationality of the killer, no details to the names of the killers. What's your take on this?
Just like you said, there's absolutely no detail. The only new thing that's emerged is a woman, which
they say
is a woman. The suspect at this stage is a woman, which I wonder how we'll receive that, but with absolutely no other no other information. One begins to wonder: did this diplomatic attaché, did he stay alone in Sudan?
Where is his family?
Where is his family?
And he was killed with knife wounds.
With a knife wounds. What are the potentially he might have been killed with a knife that was at the residence. There's so many different things that could come into this, and Sudan being as it is, what measures is our foreign service, what do you call them here, our diplomatic service,
Diplomatic corps.
The diplomatic corps. What are they? How seriously are they taking security?
Why are they not there to investigate
people, and why are they exactly not there to assist the investigation? They wouldn't have jurisdiction, but they
Yes.
have jurisdiction. To see how the investigation is being carried out. Are there any cover-ups or anything of that nature? We shouldn't just
accept on face value.
Yeah, on face value. It's unfortunate, and the diplomatic corps should, in any country, right, be more conscious of security, and that the fact that they actually do stand out as targets,
especially in the
because my fear is if this case has been treated like this, what happens to the ordinary citizen, Nigerian citizen?
We don't even hear about it. We don't even hear about it. They just disappear. Yeah. Very sad stuff. But we are going through more news stories this morning. Don't forget, you can also leave your comments on our YouTube channel. Just go to the YouTube platform, youtube.com/smooth981FM Lagos, or tweet at us. Use the hashtag freshlypressed981. Just as Okonkwo Samuel has done, he says, I wish SERAP is the third force that we hear about. They may be the only opposition to a bad governance. But seriously, can't the VP, a professor of law, not advise his boss? It's almost indisputable at this point that the presidency seems to only attack those on the other side. Let's move on.
The next story is on Guardian. We have this one. The headline is Shiites flay, distance themselves from Boko Haram. So the Islamic Movement of Nigeria, IMN, also known as Shiites, have flayed and distanced itself from the activities of Boko Haram sect. Now, Ayo, in this story, the leader of the sect, actually, well, exactly, we know he's been in jail for a while. In a statement by its spokesman, Ibrahim Musa, they noted that the attention of the Islamic movement in Nigeria had been drawn to a piece titled Nigeria's treatment of Shia minority recalls that of Boko Haram. It was written by American ambassador to Nigeria, John Campbell. They are calling this a blackmail in some form. They're saying that comparing them, the Shiites, to Boko Haram is clear blackmail, and stating things like, oh, they both have the same the same tenets. They're both a religious sect that's set in a country to establish themselves as an authority within an authority.
No.
They said
Stop
no,
relating us.
this is not what is happening. You guys are peddling these things. They're actually now in reply attacking the Western world and saying they are the ones responsible for Boko Haram and planting ISIS.
So now SERAP has taken the case to UN, which is heavily controlled by the US, and and then you have the ambassador John Campbell writing this from the US saying this, and it's actually funny. I'm going to try to be very careful with this. I'm going to try to be very careful.
Objective anyway.
Yes. But here are the claims, okay? Because we all know that they have this kind of affiliation of the regional and Islamic states. They were the first set of people to come out to attack the government for arresting him in the first place. But here are the things they said. It says, both see the secular state as evil, both want an Islamic state based on Islamic law, and both want the end to Western influence, including in education. Yes, they said it's grossly misleading, but are they saying it's not true?
No, wait, I think the distinction should be by what means do you want to achieve the objectives. The people who want, blue people, how are they doing? Are they going around clean up?
So I agree.
We don't know that yet. The blue
I
people
get you. I
movement
get
is
you.
still.
By what means do they want to?
That's the difference.
I know, but I mean, he's trying to make a comparison. I don't see any form of denouncing what it says.
Because here they
saying
stated
it's
an
misleading.
instance where exactly during the post 2011 election violence, he sheltered and protected them in the town Gialesu in Zaria.
Well, that's a very good thing. I mean, for instance, in CAR, we have Muslims actually in churches and Catholic churches. Even Christians are the ones attacking and all that. So that's a good thing. That's what we always want, unity, But like I said, I want to be very careful on this. I mean, El Zazaki is actually being represented by Falana himself, and now the case is now taken to the end. Let's see how that goes, and I don't want to say
You've not
much
been
about
shown to
it.
do anything other than protest and march and just get beaten. They need to show us something else that these guys are doing wrong.
Moving further now to Vanguard, Senate jeopardizing national security, says force headquarters. Finally, we heard from the police force headquarters in a statement they released. They said the Senate is playing politics with human lives. Stating that it's unfortunate, really, that amidst the worsening security situations in the country, that the Senate is applying sentiments and peddling with the information, really, that that might be inimical to national security. They first stated in an instance that calling the IGP to come and testify on the floor of the Senate in front of national television is not a thing ever done in any part of the world, and it's something that's going to jeopardize national security. They're following leads. It's
Okay.
that's what they said.
Okay, first of all, I think that's actually wrong. I don't agree with that. I mean, it depends on the details that are going to be discussed. Okay, now Tunde, feel free to actually come into this. Okay, jump in any point. But here's the issue I have. I've actually been on the side of this argument. I think it's actually ridiculous to expect that it has to be the IGP himself to come. I think so. It's the office of the IGP, and if he delegates to someone else,
He did delegate.
I expect the person to come. But we all know, and this is what I believe. I won't say we all know, but I strongly believe that the reason he was invited is because of the arrest
of Dino Melaye.
That's not because of the killings.
Well, they said two instances.
That's my
That of
belief.
Dino Melaye, and the
But
next
that's my personal
they
opinion.
needed him to explain the killings that have been experienced this year.
That's my personal
alone.
opinion.
Yeah.
You get, but that's what I feel, and I think that's actually funny. Now, the 2017 budget is going to be rounding up very soon. They're closing it out. These guys haven't still
Tomorrow,
signed.
actually, they promised
Yeah,
us they would do it.
So and they haven't. The budget of 2018.
Give us
this
our
is actually
money.
Why we need
Sign
this
our
guy
budget.
in a country. It's just I don't know if we could have like a shutdown that happened in the US. maybe that will actually make them sit up.
We've been
So-
in shutdown since forever.
That is
Shutdown
actually
is
what I need them
unfortunately
to do
a
right
regular
now.
state of
America's
being.
shutdown is better than ours. Yeah, it's better than our current full
and
capacity.
I also have this
many
and I also have this
distractions.
feel okay, what happens if you feel like you need the IGP and you feel like it's not explicitly written? You are the lawmakers, so make a law that says the moment I call on so and so.
But is that relevant in the state of affairs?
Well, if that's what they really want, they should probably start a kind of bill and
Tunde?
It shouldn't be relevant. It's egos here. But then I think the other thing is when they invite someone other than the IGP, it's easier for the person to say, "Oh, I'm not aware of that exactly. I need to refer back." All of that. But it's egos really and truly, and someone can come and answer, and if the person doesn't answer their queries
satisfaction.
They can now.
Insist.
That's what I feel too.
Really concerning stuff. We do have a few messages that are coming through, so let's see if we can get to some of these messages very quickly. This one has come in from Siko Delgado, who says it's very unfortunate what's happening in Nigeria. What is happening in the oil sector is also what's happening in the power sector. They keep spending money to maintain our refineries and power generation plants, yet nothing is happening. Look at the conditions of electricity supply. supply. The masses pay bills for what they are not using, and it is an absolute shame for a government to announce 5 megawatts electricity generation for an entire country, which is not enough to serve Lagos State alone. Sometimes I begin to see why Nnamdi Kanu called Nigeria a zoo, he says. Henry Manuel sends in this message up on WhatsApp saying, isn't this the same Ambassador Campbell who wrote Nigeria Dancing on the Brink? I've read that book and I think he should stay away from our internal issues. The gap between the Shiites in Nigeria and the acts of Boko Haram is obvious for all to see. I am with the Shiites, says Henry Manuel.
Moving on very quickly now. Thank you very much, Folu. Vanguard is next with a headline, Herdsmen Killing, Catholic Bishops Plan Nationwide Protest, May 22. We heard of the very sad tale and sad experience that we're still griping from that happened on April 24th, where gunmen stormed St. Ignatius Catholic Church in Benue State and killed the 17 parishioners and 2 priests. On the heels of this, the Catholic Bishops Conference held a meeting and came up with a colloquium and said they're going to march on the day that's slated both for the burial of the 2 priests and to come out, and they said it's the protest is a demonstration of solidarity with the victims of the dastardly act. In this same story, we heard that His Royal Majesty Professor James Ayase of Benue, of the Thief Kingdom, really is going to call for a meeting with the governor of Nasarawa State, Tanko Almakura. What's your take today?
Yeah, I mean, so we need to see a lot more of we need to see a lot more of this. We need to see a lot more organizations, religious bodies, not just civil society guys, but also bodies that have influence, and we can't deny that the Catholic Bishops Association have they have a voice, right? The space of insecurity in the country it's just unacceptable. There's nothing else to use to describe it. It's very unfortunate what happened to the priest that got murdered. It would be nice for them to have been involved and be more vocal prior to priests or attacks on churches. But it's never
be nice for who?
The bishops.
Oh, okay.
The bishops, right? But it's never too late. What I'm trying to say is that we should make it a almost like a state of being until things are resolved.
Well, they fall under the Christian Association of Nigeria.
Yes. So
they also had made comments, but they hadn't. This nationwide protest is escalating it.
Exactly. I mean, so you see the role of. I mean, sorry to make this reference again. You see this. You see the role of religion and of the church in the American civil rights cause. Our religious bodies need to be a lot more socially conscious and aware and involved. I don't think we do enough of it. Some try to, but this kind of thing, and then show people how to protest and how to put pressure on institutions, right? So it's not, these guys are not going to get attacked and beaten and thrown out of the streets. Do you understand? All right. So they create an umbrella for people to make, peaceful protests.
Okay. So let's also remember that Leah Sharibu is yet to be brought back. There's something that actually I always notice in a country like Nigeria, that we have 2 major religions. When these kind of things happen, you would expect that the other religious body would come out and say no, or in a way stand side by side.
Exactly.
Yeah, I just feel like, because we know the majority of the Muslims.
To be fair, this was just an announcement that was released yesterday.
Yeah, I know, but remember Leah. The thing is, I just feel like majority of Muslims are against most of the negative perpetrations that are being done. They need to come out so that we all know that we are standing as one.
Okay. We hope to see that. Next is Punch as the last story for today. NCAA suspends FirstNation Airways indefinitely. They said the reason for the suspension is stated to be flagrant and continuous violation of terms and conditions of the issuance of its air operator certificates by the carrier. And the letter was dated 31st of August 2017. They said they sent them a warning letter to stop illegal operations forthwith. Because they noticed that they had faulty aircrafts, and consequently they weren't supposed to go into operations, but they were still releasing dates for flights.
Because they told them that actually they should actually restrict it to the they said they should actually restrict it to non-scheduled operations, and then they went ahead
to schedule.
Now they've been. I mean, remember the 2012 Dana crash. if any measures that will actually forestall such from
So
happening
these are
again.
proactive steps.
They are proactive steps, and of course they said again that they added that anytime the airline demonstrates ability and willingness to comply, they're always willing to come back. So it's
a good
okay.
move. Yeah,
It's a good move.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. We are going to round up with messages that have been sent to us up on our WhatsApp. We see this one coming in from Gifted Noble up on Twitter, who says the Senate has the constitutional backing to summon anybody. The IGP is no exception, irrespective of whatever reason for which he's summoned. It's the same attitude of disobeying court orders and the rule of law. Noble, I dare to disagree with you. The Senate do not have constitutional backing to order just anybody. It has to do with their particular purview in terms of execution of laws that they themselves have signed off. That is where their ambit tends to fall. And we've also got a few messages up on WhatsApp. This one is in from PC, who says, I still insist on decommissioning the old refineries and building new modular ones for those refineries to be up to date. It is not TAM alone, but upgrades as well, says PC. Very well said. While we have got this in from Big T, who says on security, it is shameful that the IGP still has a job, that the heads of the military still have jobs. People are killed like chickens and we're playing politics. Have you noticed the influx of northerners to the south? Lagos is getting choked. Food is getting more scarce and expensive, says Big T. Very interesting. On that note, we are done for this morning. Do stay with us though, because we will be switching lanes to talk sports at 8:15 inside the locker room. But at 9 o'clock, we return to focus on one particular headline story for Lagos Talks 981, and you don't want to miss it. Follow our analysts up online. At Big Kus is Tunde Okufi. At Isho1 is Ayo Esho. And you can stick around with us because Smooth Breakfast continues right here on Smooth 98.1. Good morning.
The headlines.
That last comment is classic. It's like what Trump does. That's a classic disinformation. Lagos is getting choked, food is getting scarce.
Like lock the borders.
Lock the borders. They're just trying to be alarmist, man.
Lagos has always been choked.
Have you noticed that
choked, man.
food and fruit vendors are starting increasing?
Yeah.
Well,
but that's normal because it's rainy season. You do have these things are cyclical. So things like tomatoes, we're talking about it. We're talking about it. And yes, we've got an influx, and it is true. We have an influx, but we've always had an influx in Lagos.
The influx of people who are flooding the south and not even northerners from Nigeria.
There are people from neighboring states. Neighboring states all around. Everybody wants to be in Lagos.
Today's worried.
No, I've always been worried about 5 years ago when I realized that the guard, this was in the thick of Boko Haram,